I walked through the front door of my childhood home, expecting to find my family gathered around a birthday cake with my name on it. Instead, I froze in the doorway as 20 voices shouted, "Surprise!" while my younger brother Brandon stood in the center of our living room, grinning from ear to ear like he'd just won the lottery. Colorful streamers hung from every corner of the ceiling. Metallic balloons spelled out "Happy 21st Brandon" in gold letters, and a massive 3-layer chocolate cake sat prominently on our dining room table, with his name written in perfect cursive frosting. My parents, David and Susan, rushed forward with their arms full of expensive wrapped gifts while aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends surrounded Brandon with enthusiastic hugs and congratulations. I stood there completely invisible, forgotten, holding my car keys like an absolute fool. When someone finally noticed me lingering in the doorway, my mother casually handed me a paper plate with a half-eaten corner piece of leftover cake and a crumpled greeting card that read, "Happy birthday, Richard. Be more like your brother." The entire room erupted in laughter while I forced myself to smile and nod along. I forced that smile to stay plastered on my face and nodded along with their laughter, but inside my chest felt like it was slowly caving in on itself. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and I knew with devastating certainty that it wouldn't be the last. I watched helplessly as Brandon unwrapped gift after expensive gift with theatrical excitement, a brand new iPhone 13 Pro Max in space gray, a pair of limited edition Nike sneakers that cost $300, a genuine leather jacket that looked like it came from some high-end department store, and even a check for $500 from our grandparents with a note about investing in his future. When it finally came time for my acknowledgement, the contrast was absolutely brutal. I received a $10 gift card to a local gas station that was clearly purchased at the last minute, and a lecture from my father about stepping up my game and learning from Brandon's example. The gas station gift card still had the price sticker on the back, and the greeting card looked like it had been pulled from a bargain bin at the grocery store. I escaped to my childhood bedroom and closed the door behind me, finally allowing myself to breathe normally for the first time in an hour. The walls were still covered with my old participation trophies and second-place ribbons from high school sports and academic competitions, while Brandon's room across the hall displayed championship medals, honor roll certificates, and college acceptance letters. But here's what nobody in that living room understood or cared to know. I had earned those second-place finishes while working 25 hours a week at Johnson's hardware store to pay for my own school, supplies, sports equipment, and eventually my own car. Brandon got private tutors when his grades slipped, extra time on standardized tests because of a dubious learning disability diagnosis, and parents who attended every single one of his soccer games while missing most of my track meets because they conflicted with Brandon's schedule. I pulled out my old military surplus duffel bag from under the bed and started throwing clothes into it with shaking hands. 23 years of this systematic emotional abuse had finally broken something fundamental inside me. Something that couldn't be repaired with apologies or explanations. I remembered 8th grade when I made the honor roll for the first time in my life, maintaining a 4.0 grade point average while working afternoons at the hardware store. My parents missed the award ceremony because Brandon had soccer practice that evening. I remembered saving every dollar for 3 months during my senior year of high school to buy my own used Honda Civic, negotiating with the seller, arranging my own financing, and handling all the paperwork myself while they handed Brandon the keys to a nearly new Honda Accord on his 16th birthday with no discussion of responsibility or appreciation. I remembered countless family dinners where Brandon's achievements were celebrated extensively, while my accomplishments were acknowledged with brief nods and immediate transitions to discussing Brandon's next goal or challenge. The pattern had been consistent for as long as I could remember. But tonight's humiliation felt like the final piece of evidence in a case I'd been building against my own family. As I packed my essential belongings, voices drifted up from the living room below through the thin floors of our older house. I crept to the top of the stairs and pressed my ear to the wall, my heart pounding so hard I was afraid they might hear it downstairs. "Do you think Richard got the message tonight?" My mother, Susan, was saying to my father, David, in a tone that suggested this had been a planned intervention, rather than an accidental oversight. "God, I hope so," David replied with obvious relief in his voice. "We've been trying to motivate him for years by showing him what real success looks like. Maybe seeing how proud we are of Brandon's achievements will finally make Richard understand that he needs to step up his effort and stop making excuses. I just think if Richard tried harder, really applied himself instead of feeling sorry for himself all the time, he could be successful like Brandon, Susan continued, her voice carrying the tone of someone discussing a disappointing employee rather than her son. Sometimes, people need a wake-up call to realize they're not living up to their potential. My father actually chuckled, a sound that cut through my chest like broken glass. Honestly, I'm relieved he might finally get the message tonight. Maybe this will be the push he needs to stop wallowing in self-pity and actually accomplish something meaningful with his life, instead of just coasting along. Their words hit me like physical blows, each sentence confirming my worst fears about how they really saw me. They weren't trying to hurt me out of malice. They genuinely believed that humiliating me in front of our extended family would somehow motivate me to become a better person. In their completely twisted minds, they thought they were helping me by systematically destroying my self-confidence and comparing me unfavorably to Brandon at every possible opportunity. That realization hurt infinitely more than outright cruelty would have, because it meant they would never understand the damage they'd caused or feel any genuine remorse for their actions. I finished packing in complete silence, counting out the $237 I had managed to save from my part-time job at Johnson's hardware store over the past 6 months. It represented every dollar I'd been able to keep after paying for my own car insurance, gas, and the various expenses my parents considered character building for me to handle independently. The money would need to get me somewhere far enough away that I couldn't easily come back, to a place big enough that I could disappear completely and start over. I sat down at my old desk and wrote a simple note on a piece of notebook paper. Gone to figure out my life on my own terms. Don't follow me or try to contact me. I need to discover who I am without your constant reminders of who I'm not. I left the note on my pillow where they'd eventually find it, probably sometime tomorrow when they realized I wasn't just hiding in my room feeling sorry for myself. At 12:30 in the morning, I opened my bedroom window as quietly as possible and climbed out onto the roof of our front porch, then dropped down to the grass below. I shouldered my duffel bag and started the 2-mile walk to the Greyhound bus station downtown, passing through the same neighborhoods where I'd grown up feeling like a permanent outsider in my own family. The bus station at night was exactly as depressing as you'd imagine. Fluorescent lights flickering over cracked plastic chairs, the smell of disinfectant mixed with human desperation, and a handful of travelers who all looked like they were running from something. The ticket agent was a tired-looking woman, with gray hair and kind eyes, who seemed to recognize the desperation in my face. "Where are you heading tonight, honey?" she asked without judgment. "Chicago," I said without any hesitation. It was the first major city that came to mind, far enough away that I couldn't easily change my mind and come crawling back, big enough that I could become anonymous, and the only destination I could afford with my limited resources. She printed out a ticket and slid it across the counter. "That'll be $95 for the 6 a.m. departure. You got a place to stay when you get there?" I nodded, even though I had absolutely no plan beyond getting as far away from home as possible. "Thank you for not asking questions." She smiled sadly. "Honey, I've been working this job for 22 years. I learned a long time ago that sometimes people need to leave more than they need advice." Chicago hit me like a physical slap across the face when I stepped off that Greyhound bus at Union Station. The overwhelming noise of traffic and construction and thousands of people moving in every direction, the crowds that seemed to flow around me like I was invisible, the sheer intimidating size of buildings that stretched up farther than I could see. It all made my small hometown feel like something from a children's fairy tale. I found a grimy hostel called the Budget Inn, in a neighborhood that smelled permanently of car exhaust, fried food, and human sweat, paying $35 for a bed in a room with 5 other guys who ranged from optimistic travelers to people who'd clearly been living there much longer than originally planned. My roommates included a college kid backpacking across America, 2 construction workers between jobs, and a middle-aged man who spent most of his time muttering to himself while staring at help-wanted ads from newspapers. For the first 3 days, I walked the streets of Chicago until my feet developed blisters, filling out applications at every fast food restaurant, retail store, shipping company, and temporary employment agency I could find. My money disappeared with terrifying speed. $22 for cheap meals that barely qualified as food, $35 each night for another bed at the hostel, $8 for bus fare to reach different neighborhoods for job interviews that usually lasted less than 10 minutes. By day 4, I was down to my last $43 and starting to feel the first real waves of panic about what would happen if I couldn't find work soon. The idea of calling home and admitting defeat felt worse than the possibility of sleeping on the streets, but I was beginning to understand why so many people in my situation ended up making that humiliating phone call. The breakthrough came completely by accident when I stumbled into a temporary employment agency called Quickstaff Solutions in a downtown office building that looked like it had been constructed sometime in the 1970s. A harried receptionist named Maria looked at my hastily filled-out application with the tired expression of someone who'd seen thousands of desperate job seekers. "We need someone for data entry at a small marketing company called Pinnacle Strategies," she said without looking up from her computer screen. "The pay is $12 an hour, which isn't much in this city, but they need someone who can start immediately and won't cause any drama. You think you can handle entering numbers into spreadsheets without complaining about how boring it is?" I would have agreed to shovel manure for $12 an hour at that point. "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. When can I start?" "Right now if you want. It's not glamorous work, but if you show up on time and keep your mouth shut, they'll probably keep you around for a while." Pinnacle Strategies occupied the 3rd floor of an old office building near downtown Chicago that looked like it had been designed by someone who didn't understand how human beings actually worked. The company had somehow managed to cram about 15 employees into a space that should have comfortably held 8 people, with desks pushed together so tightly that you had to turn sideways to walk between them. My supervisor was a woman named Janet Walsh, who appeared to be in her early 40s and looked like she'd been running entirely on coffee and determination for the past several years. Her desk was covered with sticky notes, empty coffee cups, and stacks of papers that seemed to reproduce when nobody was looking. "We're growing faster than we can handle," she explained while showing me to a cramped desk that had been squeezed into what used to be a supply closet. "Small businesses all over Chicago are finally realizing they need digital marketing to survive, but most of them have absolutely no idea where to start or what they're doing. We're trying to help them build functional websites, manage their social media accounts, and improve their online presence so they don't get left behind. Your job is to organize all the client data, project timelines, and contact information so we can actually keep track of who needs what and when they need it." The work was absolutely mind-numbing, entering names, addresses, phone numbers, and project details into endless spreadsheets that seemed to grow longer every day. But it paid enough to cover my basic expenses, and more importantly, it gave me a front-row seat to observe how digital marketing actually functioned in the real world. During my lunch breaks, instead of socializing with my coworkers, I spent time exploring Pinnacle's website and social media accounts with growing amazement. For a company that specialized in marketing, their own digital presence was surprisingly terrible, an outdated website design that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2008, poor navigation that made it nearly impossible to find basic information, and completely inconsistent branding across all their platforms. I started staying after hours to use the company computers when most of the building was empty. The cleaning crew didn't arrive until 9 p.m., giving me nearly 3 hours each evening to experiment and teach myself skills I'd never had the opportunity to develop. I discovered free online tutorials and YouTube videos that explained HTML, CSS, basic graphic design principles, and social media marketing strategies. Within 2 weeks, I had taught myself enough to completely redesign Pinnacle's website as a practice project. I created mock-ups for improved layouts, wrote better copy that actually explained what the company did, and developed a cohesive visual brand that looked professional rather than amateur. The discovery that would change everything happened completely by accident on a Friday evening when Janet was working late trying to solve a problem with one of our biggest clients. I was at my desk organizing spreadsheets and trying to look busy when I heard her cursing at her computer with increasing frustration. "This stupid platform won't update the images properly," she muttered loud enough for me to hear. "I've been fighting with this social media campaign for 3 hours, and I'm about ready to throw this computer out the window." I looked over at her screen and immediately saw the problem that was causing her so much grief. "You need to adjust the aspect ratio," I said hesitantly. "The platform automatically crops images that don't match their specifications, so you have to resize them before uploading." Janet looked at me with genuine surprise. You know about image formatting and social media platforms? I've been learning some basic design and marketing stuff in my spare time, I admitted, suddenly worried that I might be overstepping some boundary. I hope that's okay. She gestured toward her screen with obvious desperation. Could you please take a look at this? I've been fighting with it for hours. And I'm supposed to have this campaign launched tonight. In less than 15 minutes, I had not only fixed her immediate problem, but also improved the entire layout and visual appeal of the client's social media page. I adjusted the image sizes, improved the color scheme, and wrote more engaging copy that would actually encourage people to interact with the posts. Janet stared at her computer screen in complete amazement. How did you learn to do this? Online tutorials mostly, and a lot of experimenting. I've actually been practicing with your company's website. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a risk. Would you like to see what I've been working on? I opened my laptop and showed her the complete website redesign I'd created for Pinnacle Strategies. Janet's eyes widened as she scrolled through my version, which looked modern, professional, and user-friendly. Everything their current site wasn't. Richard, this is absolutely incredible, she said slowly. How long did this take you to create? About 2 weeks of evenings. I hope it's okay that I was using your website as practice. I wasn't trying to criticize your current design or anything. Janet continued studying my work for several minutes before speaking again. Can I ask you something honestly? Why are you doing data entry when you clearly have skills like this? This work is better than what some of our actual designers produce. I shrugged, not sure how to explain that nobody had ever told me I was particularly good at anything. I guess I just figured this was something I could teach myself. I didn't know it was valuable. That's when Janet made the offer that would completely transform my life trajectory. I have a client, a small restaurant called Tony's Pizza Palace. The owner is an old family friend, and they desperately need a complete digital overhaul. But our budget for the project is extremely tight. Would you be interested in working on it as a freelance project over the weekend? I can offer you $300, and you can use our equipment and software. $300 represented more money than I made in an entire week at my current hourly rate. I agreed immediately, probably with more enthusiasm than was professionally appropriate. Tony's Pizza Palace turned out to be exactly the kind of authentic local business that could be transformed through effective digital marketing. The restaurant had been family-owned and operated for 32 years, serving the same neighborhood with consistent quality, and building a loyal customer base through word of mouth and genuine community connections. However, they were struggling to attract younger customers who expected businesses to have a strong online presence. Their existing website looked like it had been created sometime during the early 2000s and never updated. Basic text on a white background, no photos of the food, no online ordering system, and contact information that was difficult to find. Their social media accounts had been created years earlier but were essentially dormant, with the most recent post dating back 8 months. I spent the entire weekend researching their competitors, analyzing successful pizza restaurant marketing campaigns from around the country, and developing a comprehensive strategy that would highlight Tony's family heritage while appealing to modern consumers who made dining decisions based on online reviews and social media presence. I completely redesigned their website with high-quality food photography that I arranged to have taken by a local photographer, an easy-to-navigate menu with detailed descriptions and pricing, an integrated online ordering system that connected to their existing point-of-sale software, and compelling copy that told the story of the Martinelli family's commitment to authentic Italian recipes. For their social media presence, I created engaging content that showcased not just the food, but the people and traditions behind the restaurant. I developed a posting schedule that included behind-the-scenes kitchen photos, customer testimonials, special promotions for different days of the week, and connections to local community events. The results were immediate and more dramatic than I had dared to hope. Within 1 week of launching the new website and social media strategy, Tony's online orders increased by 40%. Their social media following grew from 53 followers to over 800 in just 10 days. Local food bloggers discovered them and started featuring Tony's Pizza Palace in posts about hidden gems and authentic neighborhood favorites throughout Chicago. Tony Martinelli, the owner, was so thrilled with the transformation that he insisted on paying me an additional $200 beyond our original agreement. More importantly, he recommended my services to 4 other local restaurant owners who were struggling with similar digital marketing challenges. Janet began referring additional clients to me for weekend projects, and word spread quickly through Chicago's tight-knit small business community about the young man who could transform struggling companies into online success stories. Within 6 weeks, I was making more money from weekend freelance work than from my full-time data entry position. I used my growing income to move out of the grimy hostel into a small but clean studio apartment in a safer neighborhood. I bought a used laptop that could handle graphic design software, a decent camera for creating content, and started building a portfolio of successful marketing campaigns that I could show to potential clients. That's when the phone calls from home started, interrupting my new life with reminders of the family I'd tried to leave behind. The first voicemail arrived on a Tuesday evening while I was working on a website redesign for a local bakery. My mother's voice sounded strained and artificially cheerful, like she was reading from a script someone had prepared for her. "Richard, honey, we miss you so much. We had absolutely no idea you were so upset about the birthday party situation. It was just meant to be fun, just family joking around the way we always do. We love you, and we really want you to come home where you belong. Brandon's been having some trouble with his college application essays, and your father thought maybe you could help him with his writing since you were always so good at that kind of thing in school." I stared at my phone in disbelief. No apology for the humiliation, no acknowledgement that their treatment had been wrong, no recognition that I might have valid reasons for leaving. They missed me because they needed something from me, help with Brandon's college applications. I deleted the message without calling back. 3 days later, another voicemail arrived, this time with a more demanding tone. "Richard, this whole situation is getting completely ridiculous. You're acting like a child, running away over absolutely nothing. Your mother has been crying every day since you left. And Brandon keeps asking where you are and when you're coming back. You need to stop this nonsense and come home to help your family. This little adventure of yours has gone on quite long enough." Still no apology. Still no acknowledgement that they had done anything wrong or hurtful. They wanted me back because my absence was inconveniencing them, not because they valued me as a person or regretted their treatment. The calls escalated over the following 2 weeks, becoming increasingly desperate and manipulative. Susan called crying, claiming I was breaking the family apart and destroying our relationships with extended family, who were asking uncomfortable questions about where I'd gone. David called angry, demanding I stop being selfish and return home immediately to fulfill my responsibilities to the family. Brandon even called once. But his message was brief and revealing. "Dude, just come back, okay? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. And I really need help with my college application stuff. You know I'm terrible at writing essays." Each call strengthened my resolve to build something independent of their expectations and demands. They wanted me back not because they realized their treatment had been wrong or harmful, but because my absence was making their lives more difficult. Brandon needed help with schoolwork, and they expected me to drop everything and provide it, just like I always had. Instead, I did something that 6 months earlier would have been completely unthinkable. I researched the legal requirements for incorporating a small business, filled out all the necessary paperwork, and officially established Midwest Digital Solutions as a legitimate company with myself as the chief executive officer. I designed professional business cards, created a comprehensive website showcasing my growing portfolio of successful campaigns, and started actively seeking larger clients who could provide the kind of contracts that would establish me as a serious player in Chicago's competitive marketing industry. The breakthrough opportunity came when Janet recommended me to Heartland Grills, a Chicago-based restaurant chain with 23 locations across Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Their marketing director, Margaret Thompson, had heard about my work transforming smaller restaurants and wanted to discuss the possibility of a complete digital overhaul for their entire brand. Margaret was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had built her career in traditional advertising and seemed skeptical about the effectiveness of digital marketing strategies. "I'll be completely honest with you," she said during our first meeting at their corporate headquarters. "I'm not convinced that this social media and website stuff actually translates into increased sales. But our younger competitors are eating our market share alive, and my boss says we need to modernize our approach or risk losing relevance entirely. Show me what you can do that traditional advertising can't." I had prepared extensively for this meeting, researching Heartland Grill's history, analyzing their current digital presence, and developing a comprehensive strategy that would modernize their brand without losing the family-friendly identity that had made them successful for over 20 years. My presentation included a complete website redesign that would integrate online ordering across all locations, a social media strategy that would highlight local community connections and customer stories, a digital advertising campaign that would target specific demographics in each market, and a customer loyalty program that would encourage repeat visits and word-of-mouth referrals. The proposal was ambitious and expensive. I quoted $50,000 for the complete project, representing more money than I'd ever imagined earning from a single contract. Margaret studied my presentation materials for what felt like hours, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, measurable results, and how my approach would differ from larger marketing agencies they'd worked with in the past. "This is either absolutely brilliant or completely insane," she said finally. "You're basically a kid with no formal training in marketing, asking me to trust you with our entire digital presence and a significant portion of our annual marketing budget." "That's completely true," I admitted. "But I'm also the person who turned Tony's Pizza Palace from a neighborhood restaurant with no online presence into the most talked-about Italian food in their area within 2 weeks. I'm the one who helped Maria's Bakery increase their wedding cake bookings by 300% in a single month by creating an Instagram strategy that showcased their artistic capabilities." I paused, meeting her skeptical gaze directly. Young doesn't mean inexperienced anymore, especially in digital marketing. The platforms and strategies I use didn't exist when traditional marketing experts were learning their trade. I learned these skills because I needed them, not because someone taught them to me in a classroom. Margaret smiled for the first time during our meeting. "You know what? You're absolutely right about that. And honestly, the traditional agencies we've worked with haven't delivered results that justify their fees. When can you start?" I signed the contract that afternoon, officially establishing myself as a legitimate player in Chicago's marketing industry, with a client base that extended far beyond small local businesses. The Heartland Grills project consumed nearly every waking hour of my life for the following 3 months. But it transformed Midwest Digital Solutions from a promising side business into a legitimate enterprise with real employees and significant overhead expenses. The scope of managing digital marketing for 23 restaurant locations across 3 states required me to develop systems, processes, and capabilities I'd never needed before. I hired my first employee, a talented graphic designer named Sarah Chen, who brought professional design skills that complemented my self-taught marketing knowledge. Sarah had recently graduated from the Art Institute of Chicago and was looking for an opportunity to build something meaningful rather than just filling a position at an established agency. 2 weeks later, I brought on Marcus Rodriguez, a social media specialist who understood platforms and trends that I'd barely heard of. Marcus had been managing social media for several Chicago nightclubs and restaurants, building a reputation for creating content that actually drove foot traffic rather than just generating likes and followers. The results of our Heartland Grills campaign exceeded even my most optimistic projections and established Midwest Digital Solutions as a company that could deliver measurable returns on marketing investments. Within 2 months of launching our comprehensive digital strategy, Heartland Grills' online orders increased by 180% across all locations. Their social media engagement grew from practically zero to over 50,000 active followers who regularly shared photos of their meals and recommended specific menu items to friends and family. Local news stations in Chicago, Indianapolis, and Milwaukee started featuring their digital transformation as an example of how traditional businesses could successfully modernize their approach to customer engagement. Margaret Thompson became my most enthusiastic advocate, recommending Midwest Digital Solutions to her extensive network of restaurant industry contacts throughout the Midwest. She spoke at trade conferences about the importance of digital marketing, and specifically mentioned our work as proof that small, specialized agencies could often deliver better results than large, traditional marketing companies. Within 6 months of completing the Heartland Grills project, I had signed contracts with 12 different food service companies, ranging from single-location family restaurants to regional chains with multiple states. The demand for our services grew so rapidly that I was turning down potential clients because we couldn't handle additional projects without compromising the quality of work for existing customers. I moved Midwest Digital Solutions into a proper office space in a downtown Chicago building, complete with dedicated workstations for each team member, a conference room for client meetings, and space to expand as we continued growing. I traded my used Honda Civic for a practical but reliable newer car that looked professional when I drove to client meetings. More importantly, I was building something that belonged entirely to me, a company with my name on the incorporation papers, employees who depended on the decisions I made, and a reputation in Chicago's business community that I had earned through consistent results and professional integrity. The local media started paying attention to our success story. Chicago Magazine featured me in an article titled "Young Entrepreneurs to Watch," highlighting how I'd built a successful marketing company from nothing within a single year. A popular business podcast interviewed me about digital marketing strategies for traditional companies, and I spoke at a small business conference about the importance of online presence for local establishments. The recognition felt intoxicating, but it also felt fragile, like something that could disappear if I made the wrong decision or lost focus on what had made us successful. Late at night, alone in my apartment, I sometimes wondered if I was fooling myself about my abilities. If this was all just beginner's luck that would eventually run out when real marketing professionals noticed what I was doing. Those moments of self-doubt usually coincided with another round of phone calls from my family, reminding me of all the reasons I'd left home, and all the people who had never believed I was capable of achieving anything significant. The tone of the family calls had evolved dramatically from confused disappointment to genuine desperation. My mother's most recent voicemail was almost unrecognizable compared to her earlier messages. "Richard, please. I'm literally begging you to call us back. Brandon was arrested last week for drunk driving, and he's been expelled from Northwestern University. We don't know what to do or how to handle this situation. Your father's working 2 jobs trying to pay for a lawyer, but we're drowning in legal fees and medical bills. I know we made mistakes with you, honey, but family has to stick together when things get really bad. We need your help." For the first time since leaving home, I felt a genuine stab of guilt about my decision to cut contact with my family. Brandon, in legal trouble. My parents struggling financially to cover unexpected expenses. These were serious problems that my newfound success could easily solve. I could write a check that would cover Brandon's legal fees without significantly impacting my growing business or personal savings. But then I remembered standing in that living room, holding a half-eaten piece of cake while everyone laughed at the greeting card telling me to be more like Brandon. I remembered years of being told I wasn't good enough, smart enough, ambitious enough to achieve anything meaningful. I remembered my parents discussing downstairs how my humiliation would hopefully motivate me to step up my game. My family needed me now, but where had they been when I needed support, encouragement, or basic recognition of my efforts and achievements? They wanted me back because I could solve their problems, not because they valued me as a person or regretted the way they'd treated me for 23 years. I saved the voicemail but didn't return the call. Instead, I focused my energy on expanding Midwest Digital Solutions and pursuing our most ambitious contract opportunity yet. A major hotel chain that was considering our proposal to manage their digital marketing across 15 states. The contract would be worth over $200,000 and would establish our company as a regional player rather than just a local Chicago success story. Landing this account would prove that our growth wasn't just luck or timing, but the result of genuine expertise and professional capabilities that could compete with much larger agencies. 3 weeks later, my father called with a voice I'd never heard before, small, defeated, stripped of the confidence and authority that had defined him throughout my childhood. "Son, I know you're angry with us, and maybe you have every right to be, but Brandon's in real trouble this time. The lawyer says he might actually go to prison if we can't afford a better defense attorney. Your mother's been having panic attacks and heart palpitations, and I haven't slept more than 3 hours a night in weeks. I'm not asking you to come home permanently or fix everything. Just help us get through this crisis, and then you can go back to whatever life you're building in Chicago." This was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from my father, acknowledging that I might have legitimate reasons for being angry rather than just demanding that I forgive and forget. But it still wasn't a real recognition that their treatment of me had been wrong or harmful. They were sorry that I was upset, not sorry for the decades of favoritism, criticism, and emotional neglect that had driven me away. I made a decision that would have been completely impossible just 12 months earlier. I deleted the voicemail without calling back and signed the hotel chain contract that same afternoon, officially establishing Midwest Digital Solutions as one of the fastest-growing marketing agencies in the Midwest. By the first anniversary of my departure from home, Midwest Digital Solutions had become a significant force in Chicago's competitive marketing landscape, employing 8 full-time people and managing digital campaigns for 43 clients across 6 states. We'd been featured in 3 different business magazines as an example of successful entrepreneurship, and I'd been invited to speak at marketing conferences in Chicago, Milwaukee, and Indianapolis. My personal income had grown from the $237 I'd left home with to an annual salary of over $200,000, not including the equity value of the company I'd built from nothing. The transformation felt surreal sometimes. I would walk through my spacious downtown office, watching my team execute sophisticated marketing campaigns that reached hundreds of thousands of potential customers, and remember sitting in that grimy hostel room wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. The success brought new challenges that I'd never anticipated. Clients expected faster turnaround times and more innovative strategies as competition in the digital marketing space intensified. My employees needed management, professional development, and clear direction about our company's future growth plans. Competitors had started copying our most successful techniques, forcing us to constantly innovate and develop new approaches. I found myself working 12 to 14 hours a day and loving every minute of it, because this was my creation, built according to my vision and standards rather than someone else's expectations. Every client we landed, every successful campaign we executed, every employee we hired represented proof that I was capable of building something meaningful without my family's support or approval. That's when my Aunt Carol reached out through Facebook with a message that would change everything I thought I understood about my family history. Carol was my father's sister, someone I'd only encountered at occasional family gatherings and holiday celebrations. She'd always been polite but distant, never showing much interest in our family's internal dynamics or taking sides in any conflicts between my parents and their children. Her Facebook message was brief but intriguing. "Richard, I've been following your business success story online through various articles and posts. I'm genuinely proud of what you've accomplished and impressed by your determination. I think there are some important things about your family situation that you don't know, things that might help explain some of the treatment you experienced growing up. Would you be willing to meet for coffee and conversation? I believe it's time someone told you the complete truth." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop called The Grind near my office the following Saturday morning. Carol arrived looking nervous and uncertain, clutching a manila envelope like it contained nuclear launch codes or state secrets. "I should have done this conversation years ago," she began without any small talk or pleasantries. "But family loyalty can be complicated and messy, and I kept thinking maybe things would improve on their own without any intervention from outside family members. Obviously, they didn't get better." She opened the envelope with trembling hands and pulled out a birth certificate, official adoption papers, and several photographs I'd never seen before in my life. "You were adopted, Richard. Your birth parents, Michael and Jennifer Hartley, died in a car accident when you were 3 years old. David and Susan had been trying unsuccessfully to have children for 6 years when they made the decision to adopt you through a private agency. For the first 2 years, they were absolutely wonderful parents who treated you like the miracle they'd been praying for." I stared at the documents spread across our small table, my mind struggling to process information that recontextualized my entire childhood and family history. The birth certificate showed different parents' names, the adoption papers were dated when I was 3, and the photographs showed a young couple holding a smiling toddler who was unmistakably me. When Susan unexpectedly got pregnant with Brandon 2 years after adopting you, everything changed in ways they probably didn't even consciously recognize. Carol continued, her voice heavy with regret. "They didn't plan it or decide it deliberately, but they started treating you differently. Not as their real child, even though they would never admit that distinction out loud or acknowledge it to themselves." My hands were shaking as I examined the photographs more closely. Michael and Jennifer Hartley looked young, happy, and genuinely excited about parenthood. They were people who had actively chosen to have me, planned for my future, and died trying to provide me with a stable, loving home. "Why didn't anyone tell me about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Carol's expression grew increasingly sad. They convinced themselves they were protecting you from emotional trauma. But really, I think they were protecting themselves from having to explain why they treated their adopted son differently from their biological son. The revelation explained everything that had confused and hurt me for 23 years. The constant unfavorable comparisons to Brandon, the different standards and expectations, the way my achievements were minimized, while his were celebrated extensively. I wasn't imagining the favoritism or being overly sensitive about normal family dynamics. The differential treatment was real, systematic, and based on a biological distinction that nobody had bothered to explain to me. "There's more you need to know," Carol said quietly, pulling out additional documents from the envelope. "The family's financial situation is significantly worse than they've admitted to you in their phone calls. Susan's been hospitalized twice in the past 6 months for stress-related heart problems that required emergency room treatment. The medical bills, combined with Brandon's legal fees and court costs, have pushed them into serious financial crisis." She showed me copies of medical bills, legal invoices, and financial documents that painted a picture of a family in complete economic collapse. They've already lost the house to foreclosure and are living in a rental property that costs more than they can afford. David's working 2 jobs, his regular position at the manufacturing plant and weekend shifts at a warehouse, but they can barely cover their basic living expenses. "Good," I said, surprising myself with the bitterness and anger in my voice. Maybe now they'll understand what it feels like to struggle without any support or help from people who are supposed to care about them. Carol looked at me with understanding, rather than judgment. "I don't blame you for feeling that way, Richard. What they did to you was wrong, and they're facing the natural consequences of their choices and priorities. But I thought you deserved to know the complete truth about your adoption and about how desperate their situation has become." After Carol left, I sat alone in that coffee shop for nearly 2 hours, staring at the adoption papers and photographs while trying to reconcile this new information with everything I'd believed about my family history. The truth about my adoption didn't change what had happened or excuse their treatment of me, but it provided a context that made their behavior somewhat understandable, if not forgivable. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in months. I sat in my apartment and listened to every single voicemail my family had left over the past year, hearing the progression from entitled demands to desperate pleas with new understanding about what was driving their increasing panic. Susan's most recent message was almost incoherent with stress and desperation. "Richard, please. I'm literally begging you to call us back. Brandon's court date is next Thursday, and the public defender says he'll probably get 6 months in county jail because we can't afford a real defense attorney. I've been having chest pains and heart palpitations that landed me in the emergency room twice this month, and the doctor says it's all stress-related. Your father's talking about selling his truck to pay for a better lawyer. But that truck is how he gets to both of his jobs. I know we failed you somehow as parents, but please don't abandon us completely when we need help the most. We're still family, no matter what mistakes we made." For the first time in over a year, I felt genuine sympathy for my parents, rather than just anger and resentment. They were experiencing the natural consequences of their choices and priorities, but they were also human beings in crisis who were watching their family fall apart. More importantly, I was no longer the powerless young man who had climbed out his bedroom window with a backpack and life savings of $200. I had resources, professional success, established relationships, and most crucially, choices about how to respond to their situation. I made the decision to drive home and confront my family face to face, not to rescue them or resume my old role as the family disappointment, but to establish new boundaries and terms for any future relationship we might have. The 3-hour drive from Chicago back to my hometown gave me plenty of time to rehearse different versions of the conversation I was planning to have with my family. I practiced angry confrontations where I detailed every hurt and injustice I'd experienced, calm explanations where I laid out my perspective rationally, and emotional appeals where I tried to help them understand the damage their treatment had caused. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the small rental house where my family now lived, I still wasn't sure which approach would emerge when I actually faced them in person. The house was a dramatic step down from the 4-bedroom suburban home where I'd grown up. A tiny 2-bedroom rental in an older neighborhood, with a postage stamp yard, peeling paint on the front porch, and windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in months. My father's old pickup truck sat in the driveway with a spiderweb crack across the windshield and rust eating through the rear bumper. This was what financial desperation looked like when it happened to people who had never experienced real hardship or uncertainty about their basic security. I straightened my expensive suit jacket, checked my appearance in the car mirror, and walked to the front door with confidence I'd earned through a year of professional success. Everything about my appearance was designed to communicate immediately that I had not just survived without them, but thrived beyond their expectations or imagination. I knocked on the front door rather than using the doorbell, wanting to control the pace and tone of our initial interaction. Susan opened the door and actually gasped when she saw me. She looked significantly older than her 52 years, with gray streaks throughout her hair that hadn't been there when I left, deep lines around her eyes that spoke of chronic stress and worry, and a general appearance of someone who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. "Richard," she whispered, then called over her shoulder in a voice filled with desperate hope. "David! Brandon! He's here! He actually came back!" They gathered in the tiny living room like awkward strangers rather than family members, each of us uncertain about how to navigate this reunion after more than a year of silence and separation. Brandon looked absolutely terrible, significantly thinner than I remembered, unshaven, wearing clothes that hung loose on his frame, like he'd been borrowing someone else's wardrobe. His eyes had a hollow, defeated quality that I'd never seen before. The look of someone who'd finally encountered consequences he couldn't charm or excuse his way out of. David appeared exhausted in a way that went beyond normal tiredness, the deep weariness of someone who'd been working multiple jobs while watching his family fall apart, and his carefully constructed life collapse around him. "You came," Susan said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "I honestly can't believe you actually came back to help us." "I came to have a conversation," I clarified carefully. "Not to move back home, not to automatically fix all your problems. Just to talk about what's happened and where we go from here." The disappointment that crossed their faces was immediate and obvious. They had been hoping for salvation, not negotiation. David spoke first, falling back on the authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood. "Son, I know we probably made some mistakes in how we handled things with you growing up. But family is family. Blood is thicker than water, and we stick together when times get tough. Brandon needs serious help with his legal situation, and we're drowning financially. You've obviously done very well for yourself." He gestured toward my professional appearance. "So maybe you could help us get back on our feet and put this whole thing behind us." "Mistakes," I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air. "Is that what you call what you did to me?" Susan stepped forward with the pleading expression she'd perfected over the years. "Honey, we did our absolute best with the knowledge and resources we had. We thought we were helping you become strong and independent, teaching you resilience and self-reliance. Look how successful you are now. Maybe our approach worked better than we realized at the time." The sheer audacity of that statement, taking credit for my success while simultaneously asking me to rescue them from their failures, took my breath away and confirmed that they still didn't understand or acknowledge what they'd done wrong. "Let me tell you what actually happened," I said, keeping my voice calm and measured despite the anger building inside my chest. "You made me feel worthless and inadequate for 23 years. You gave Brandon every advantage, opportunity, and expression of love, while teaching me that nothing I accomplished was ever good enough to earn your approval or respect. You threw me a humiliating birthday party that was actually meant to celebrate him, handed me literal garbage while he received expensive gifts, and laughed while I pretended it didn't destroy something fundamental inside me." Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Dude, that birthday party thing was really messed up. I actually told them it was weird and mean, but they said it would be funny and would motivate you to try harder. And did you speak up for me when it mattered?" I asked him directly, already knowing the answer. He looked down at the floor with obvious shame. "I was getting all those presents and attention. I didn't want to rock the boat or create drama that might ruin my party." At least he was being honest about his selfishness and cowardice. "Richard, we're family," David repeated, as if saying it multiple times would somehow make it meaningful. "Whatever happened in the past, whatever mistakes we might have made, we need to stick together now when everything's falling apart. I've been working 60 hours a week between 2 jobs, But Brandon's legal fees and court costs are killing us financially. Your mother's medical bills from her stress-related health problems are piling up faster than we can pay them. We could lose everything we've worked for. Everything like what? I asked with deliberate coldness. Like the house you already lost to foreclosure? Like the college education for Brandon that he threw away by drinking and driving? Like the secure financial future you never built because you assumed everything would always work out? The room fell completely silent, except for Susan's quiet crying. That's when I decided to reveal the information that Aunt Carol had shared with me. I know about the adoption. The color drained from both my parents' faces so quickly that I thought one of them might faint. Brandon looked completely confused. What adoption? He asked, looking back and forth between me and our parents. I pulled out the birth certificate and adoption papers that Carol had given me. I know that Michael and Jennifer Hartley were my biological parents. I know that David and Susan adopted me when I was 3 years old after my birth parents died in a car accident. And I know that everything changed in this family when Brandon was born 2 years later. Susan actually collapsed into a chair, her face white with shock. Carol told you. She promised she would never interfere. Someone should have told me 20 years ago, I replied. But yes, Aunt Carol thought I deserved to know the truth. She also explained why you treated me differently from Brandon, because I wasn't really your son. I was a project, a charity case, someone you felt obligated to raise but never fully accepted as your own child. That's absolutely not true, David said, but his denial lacked any conviction. Isn't it? I challenged. Name one time in my entire life when you celebrated my achievements, the way you celebrated Brandon's. Name one occasion when you defended me instead of criticizing me. Name a single memory when you made me feel like I truly belonged in this family, rather than like an outsider who needed to constantly prove his worth. The silence stretched on for what felt like several minutes while they searched for examples that didn't exist. Brandon was staring at the adoption papers with dawning comprehension and horror. Wait, Richard's adopted, and you never told either of us? And you treated him differently because of that? We didn't want him to feel different or excluded, Susan said through her tears, the irony of that statement apparently lost on her. So instead, you made him feel unwanted and inadequate, I replied. Do you have any understanding of what your treatment did to my self-worth and confidence? Do you realize how many years I spent believing I was fundamentally flawed as a person because nothing I accomplished was ever good enough for the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally? David attempted a different strategy, falling back on manipulation and guilt. Look, maybe we made some errors in judgment about how we handled things, but you turned out successful and independent anyway, so what's the real harm? And Brandon is your brother, regardless of biology. Doesn't that relationship mean something to you? Brandon is your son, I corrected firmly. I'm someone you accepted responsibility for, and then resented for not being grateful enough for the bare minimum effort you provided. The brutal honesty of my words hung in the air like smoke from a fire, impossible to ignore or minimize. So what happens now? Brandon asked quietly, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Are you just going to walk away and let me go to prison? Let Mom and Dad lose everything because of my screw-ups? I looked at my younger brother, technically my adoptive brother, and saw not the golden child who had received every advantage and opportunity, but a young man who had been systematically set up for failure by parents who never taught him about consequences, responsibility, or the real world beyond their protection and enabling. What I'm going to do, I said slowly, is offer all of you a choice about how we move forward. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd spent 20 years feeling like a permanent outsider in my own family. When I turned back to face them, I felt a sense of calm and clarity that I'd never experienced before in their presence. Here's what I'm prepared to do, I began, my voice steady and confident. I will pay off the mortgage on your old house so you can move back to the neighborhood where you're comfortable. I will cover Brandon's legal fees in full so he can avoid jail time and get the defense attorney he needs. I will take care of all of Susan's outstanding medical bills so she can focus on recovering her health without worrying about financial stress. Hope flickered in their eyes like candles in a dark room, but I held up my hand to indicate I wasn't finished. However, every dollar of financial assistance comes with specific conditions and legal documentation. This isn't charity or family obligation. This is a business arrangement with clear terms, expectations, and consequences. Every cent will be documented as a structured loan with reasonable but firm repayment schedules. David started to object, but I continued before he could speak. Second, Brandon, you will immediately enter a comprehensive substance abuse treatment program and complete it successfully, even if it takes multiple attempts. You will get a legitimate job, not at my company, but somewhere you can learn actual job skills, work ethic, and personal responsibility. You will pay back every dollar of your legal fees over the next 5 years, and you will submit to regular drug and alcohol testing for at least 2 years. Brandon nodded eagerly, probably agreeing to anything that would keep him out of prison. Yes, absolutely. Whatever you think is best, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Third, I said, looking directly at my parents, both of you will enter family counseling with a licensed therapist who specializes in adoption issues and family dynamics. You will attend sessions consistently, complete assigned homework, and demonstrate genuine effort to understand why your parenting approach was psychologically harmful. You will read books about adoption, emotional intelligence, and healthy family relationships. This isn't optional therapy, this is mandatory education. Susan wiped her eyes and nodded. We can do that. We want to understand what went wrong and how to fix it. Fourth, our relationship moving forward will be based entirely on mutual respect and healthy boundaries, not family obligation or guilt. I will visit when I choose to visit, help when I choose to help, and maintain whatever level of contact feels psychologically healthy for me. The days of making demands on me simply because we share a family name are permanently over. I walked over to my briefcase and pulled out a folder of documents I'd prepared during the drive from Chicago. I've already contacted a family law attorney and had preliminary agreements drawn up. If you accept these terms, we can sign contracts today that spell out exactly what assistance I'm providing, what I expect in return, and what happens if anyone fails to meet their obligations. The room was completely quiet except for the sound of Susan's occasional sniffling. David finally spoke, his voice subdued and thoughtful. Those are fair terms, difficult and demanding, but fair. I think maybe we do need someone to force us to examine our behavior honestly instead of making excuses. Why are you doing this? Brandon asked, genuine confusion in his voice. After everything we put you through, after years of treating you like garbage, why not just walk away completely and let us face the consequences of our choices? I considered his question carefully before answering. Because walking away completely and leaving you all to destroy yourselves wouldn't make me a better person. Just a bitter one. But more importantly, because I learned something crucial about myself this past year that all of you need to understand. I pulled out my phone and showed them photographs from my office, pictures of my team working on client projects, and copies of articles that had been written about Midwest Digital Solutions and my success as an entrepreneur. I built this business from $237 and a duffel bag full of clothes. I taught myself digital marketing through free online tutorials, hired and managed employees, executed million-dollar marketing campaigns, and created a company that now employs 8 people and serves 43 businesses across 6 states. I accomplished all of this in less than 15 months, starting with no connections, no financial support, and no safety net. Susan looked at the photographs with genuine amazement. You really did all this in just 1 year? The skills and capabilities were always there, I explained. But I spent 23 years believing I wasn't capable of real success because you convinced me that achievement looked like being Brandon, getting good grades handed to me, receiving support and resources without earning them, being praised for minimal effort rather than exceptional results. I sat back down, facing all 3 of them directly. Here's what this experience taught me. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most also prepare us for our greatest achievements, though not in the way they intended. Your rejection taught me complete self-reliance and independence. Your constant criticism taught me to develop my own internal standards of excellence and success. Your favoritism toward Brandon taught me that external validation from other people is meaningless if you don't genuinely respect and believe in yourself. David shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of regret and amazement. We honestly thought we were helping you become stronger and more resilient. You were helping me become stronger, I admitted, just not in the way you intended or understood. You made me realize that real family isn't about blood, relationships, or obligation. It's about people who actively choose to love, support, and respect each other consistently. When you stopped providing that kind of family environment, I was forced to learn how to love and support myself. Brandon leaned forward, still processing everything he'd heard. So what happens next? Do we somehow become a normal, functional family now? I smiled, though it carried more sadness than happiness. We become something different. Maybe better than what we were. Maybe just healthier. But only if everyone commits completely to doing the difficult work of genuine change, rather than just apologizing and hoping things return to the way they used to be. Over the following 8 months, my family slowly began the challenging process of transformation. Susan and David entered intensive family counseling and, for the first time in their lives, started examining their parenting choices with honest self-reflection rather than defensive justification. They attended weekly therapy sessions, completed assigned reading about adoption and family dynamics, and participated in support groups for parents who had made serious mistakes with their children. Brandon successfully completed a 90-day inpatient rehabilitation program and found employment at a local automotive repair shop, where he was learning practical skills while earning the money to repay his legal fees. He attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings 3 times per week and submitted to random drug and alcohol testing as part of his probation agreement. Most importantly, he started taking genuine responsibility for his choices and their consequences, instead of assuming that someone else would always fix his problems or minimize the impact of his poor decisions. I established the Hartley Foundation in honor of my biological parents, creating a nonprofit organization that provides scholarships, counseling services, and practical support for adopted children who are facing family challenges or discrimination. The foundation gave me a meaningful way to transform my painful childhood experiences into something that could help other young people in similar situations. Midwest Digital Solutions continued its rapid growth, expanding operations into Minneapolis, Milwaukee, and Indianapolis, while maintaining our reputation for delivering exceptional results for small and medium-sized businesses. We employed 27 people and had been recognized as one of the fastest-growing marketing agencies in the Midwest. I was invited to speak at national conferences about entrepreneurship, digital marketing strategies, and overcoming personal obstacles to achieve professional success. Several universities asked me to guest lecture in their business and marketing programs, sharing my experience of building a company from scratch in a competitive industry. The relationship with my adoptive family improved gradually and consistently. We began having dinner together once a month, usually at restaurants where the neutral environment helped keep our interactions positive and constructive. Susan learned to ask genuine questions about my life and business, rather than just updating me about their situation and needs. David started expressing authentic pride in my achievements, instead of either taking credit for them or dismissing them as luck. For the first time, he began treating me like an independent adult whose opinions and decisions deserved respect. Brandon and I developed what could honestly be called a friendship, based on mutual respect and shared experiences, rather than family obligation or guilt. He often asked my advice about work situations and personal decisions, but he also started offering support and encouragement for my business challenges and personal goals. But the most significant change was internal and psychological. I stopped seeking approval from people who had spent years withholding it, and I started trusting my own judgment about what constituted success and fulfillment. I stopped measuring my worth against other people's standards and began setting goals based on my own values and interests. I stopped seeing myself as the family disappointment who needed to prove his worth through constant achievement, and I started recognizing myself as someone who had overcome genuinely difficult circumstances to build something meaningful and sustainable. The most profound lesson that emerged from this entire experience was understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for people who hurt you is to refuse to enable their destructive behavior. Walking away from my family temporarily forced them to confront the natural consequences of their choices and attitudes, which ultimately created an opportunity for genuine growth and change that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. More broadly, I learned that our greatest strengths and capabilities often develop directly from our deepest wounds and most painful experiences. The rejection that felt so devastating when I was 23 became the foundation of my independence, self-reliance, and entrepreneurial success. The criticism that damaged my confidence during childhood ultimately taught me to develop internal validation and personal standards that couldn't be shaken by other people's opinions. Family relationships are incredibly complex and often painful, but they don't have to remain toxic or destructive forever. People can change their behavior and attitudes, but only when they're genuinely motivated to do the difficult work of honest self-examination and personal growth. Sometimes that motivation comes from experiencing the natural consequences of their actions, rather than being rescued from them repeatedly. Today, I run a successful business that I built entirely through my own effort and determination, maintain healthy relationships with people who respect and value me, and use my experience to help other young people who are facing similar family challenges and personal obstacles. The young man who climbed out his bedroom window with a backpack and $200 had no idea that leaving home would become the first step toward discovering his true potential and building a life based on his own values rather than other people's expectations. But I want to hear from you about your own experiences. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between family loyalty and your own emotional well-being? How do you balance loving someone with refusing to enable their destructive or hurtful behavior? What strategies have you developed for building confidence and self-worth when the people closest to you consistently undermine your efforts? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, because these situations are far more common than most people want to admit, and we can all learn valuable lessons from each other's stories and perspectives. If this story resonated with your own experiences or provided insights that might be helpful in your situation, please give it a like to help other people who might be facing similar family dynamics or personal challenges find it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about overcoming difficult circumstances, building meaningful success, and developing the confidence to create the life you actually want, rather than the one other people expect from you. And please share this story with someone who might need to hear that it's not only acceptable but sometimes necessary to prioritize your own growth and well-being, even when family members disapprove or try to make you feel guilty for setting healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story and taking the time to understand the complexity of family relationships and personal growth. Remember that your worth as a person isn't determined by other people's treatment of you or their opinions about your potential, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bet on yourself when nobody else believes you're capable of success. Take care of yourselves, trust your instincts about what's healthy for you, and I'll see you in the next story about overcoming challenges and building the life you deserve.